And I know you watch television, yes, I'm sure you do watch television. And I hope, apart from watching reality shows and some of that stuff which I'm not really excited by, but every now and then I dare say I cheat also, so to speak. But I do hope you watch some good news coverage and serious discussion. It's worth doing that. And I know you watch game shows and things like that, and maybe you have these, I'm trying to think what my daughter used to play with. Big Boy, Game Boy? Game Boy. Is that out of date now? It's over? It's history? Well, you've moved ahead so quickly probably. But you know, when you have little games and you press a button and somebody gets killed, that is not something you really want to do, is it? I mean, I know it's a game and maybe it's fun, and for the moment you think you're quick and you're clever, but killing people for fun, even in a game, there must be something else that can be done that can also be fun. Because the thought of killing somebody, if you think it through, I know none of you here would want to kill anybody. Why would you want to do that? It's not something that any one of us possibly could do. I know, for example, when they recruit young Americans to go into the war, into the army, one of the tasks they have is to convince young people from reasonable backgrounds and education and what have you, to train them to kill people is their main task, because that's not something that you and I grow up prepared to do. And hopefully you will never grow up prepared and trained to do that, but that is what happens. So I want you to look at television differently and think differently, and also pick up that newspaper, because newspapers, I know they're going out of fashion perhaps, and you're looking at the internet, and I hope there you're looking at news also and seeing what's happening in the world, because here in Malaysia, you're living almost in an island of extraordinarily well-being. I know it's not perfect, I know there are struggles going on, that's healthy, that's what happens, but the rest of the world around you, maybe it's far away, maybe you don't think of the Congo. You know, in the last 10 years, 5 or 6 million people have lost their lives in the Congo. And it's not just people, it's children, it's families, it's little houses, it's small villages, it's small towns. Their schools have been destroyed, burned down, their clinics, their health care, their hopes, their employment, their parents have been killed, they're now orphans. In Iraq, I believe we now have 1 million orphans, young children whose parents have lost their lives due to the American invasion and due to sanctions and all the terrible things that have happened in Malaysia. So you need to see what's happening. You need to look and understand Gaza and how the Palestinians, through no fault of their own, have lost their homes in various parts of the Middle East, have been rounded up and put into camps, and some have been there, the families have been there for 30, 40, even 50 years. These are young people just like you. They have the same dream that you have, but we've taken that dream away. We've allowed that dream to be destroyed, and that is not acceptable. And it wouldn't be acceptable in Malaysia, and it's certainly not acceptable there. It's the same in Iraq, and today you can watch the news and see Afghanistan, the bombing, the use of these frightening long-distance drones which drop these very effective weapons, I guess, from a military point of view, but weapons which can land on civilians and kill people at a wedding or kill children, drop cluster munitions which scatter thousands of little gadgets on the ground, and when you pick them up, they blow up and you lose your hand, or you lose your leg, or you lose your eye. The world is full of horrible things, and though you're here in Malaysia, you need to sort of stay in touch with some of the things around the world which are not so good or not so nice. The world can be very nasty for many people. You think about Sudan or Somalia, Vietnam in the past and Vietnam today, where children are being born still deformed because of the use of Agent Orange, which was a chemical spray used to clean the horizons so bombing could take place or troops could not move unnoticed by the United States and others. It's something that is really frightening. And today's comparable weapon might be depleted uranium. Depleted uranium is used by the military because it's a byproduct of the domestic nuclear industry. It's a heavy metal, so a piece of depleted uranium is like a piece of lead, but multiplied by 2, if you know it in terms of weight. It has this extraordinary capacity when it's put in front of a missile, or it's put into a small bullet in a rifle or something of that sort. It can cut through concrete, reinforced concrete. It can cut through metal. So, for example, in the Iraq War of 1991 and again in 2003, and likewise in Lebanon and places like that when DU has been used, a DU shell fired from a British or American tank was able to cut through the old tanks that the Iraqis used 4 inches of solid steel. 4 inches, that's heavy steel. And this DU point can cut its way right through by burning. It burns its way through the metal, and it sort of strengthens and reunites itself as it goes through the metal. When it gets inside, it explodes, and of course the tank explodes, and then you have billions of particles of depleted uranium, of a uranium quality, which float up into the horizon. Billions of particles. The wind will pick them up and blow them 150 miles or 1,000 miles. Or the ones that don't get blown away will sink into the ground, go into the water, go into the soil, end up in your carrots and your carrot soup or whatever you had for lunch. And when you consume vegetables or root crops that have been contaminated, it damages your inside. When you breathe in this debris of depleted uranium, it destroys your lungs. And today we know we have thousands, hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of people who are damaged or partially damaged. We have American troops who have died because they were exposed by their own government to depleted uranium. And of course we have Iraqis, and we have Saudis and Kuwaitis and others who live close by. And this goes on, this has been used. This is a really frightening weapon. And it's all part of Mahathir's vision. We have to stop this practice. This makes no sense. This is not the way to run the world. War, as I said, steals life, destroys the human rights, takes away your hopes, takes away your dreams. Now, here in 2005, Tun Mahathir took his vision of a world without war, and brought many of us here, to a conference, and he and we looked at a draft, and we did some rewording, and he put out, I should say, what the Kuala Lumpur initiative to criminalize war. And some of these little booklets are available, and hopefully they'll be in your library, and together with some buttons. Some of you are wearing buttons, I'm happy to see. Thank you very much. And there's a few other bits and pieces which you can look at and think about, and perhaps read someday, or read whenever you wish. It's a very simple statement, and I just thought I'd run through it quickly, not all of it. But what united us, as it says here, is the fact that we feel that peace is essential for human well-being, for life, for all the things and expectations we have for life, and it's essential to the survival and the well-being of the human race. I think there's nothing complicated about that. And you have to remember that one of the reasons that Malaysia is such an extraordinary country, and that you are sitting here today, is because you are at peace. You haven't experienced the nightmare and the horror of warfare. And there hasn't been that sort of violence in this country for a very, very long time, way back when you don't need to think about it perhaps anymore. So given that situation, the feeling of Tun Mahathir and those of us who were involved was that we need to establish and promote peace and try to change, as the United Nations Charter says, the concept and the danger of warfare, which it's written also in this little book also. And we said that we were outraged by the frequent use of war for change. Now that, you see, is basically not the way to go. When you see something wrong with the world, or something wrong in somebody else's country, you see violations of human rights, you see wars breaking out between one neighbor and another, well, maybe you're tempted to send in your tanks or your aircraft and bomb the place into, I don't know, peace. Well, it's not going to be peace. It's going to be a catastrophe. What we need to do is to find a different way to make things stop or make things change. And trying to make change through warfare is just not very viable. Talk to the Vietnamese and see what they went through. Now, they've recovered extraordinarily, and it's a miracle, I would say, perhaps. Or look at other states who've gone through warfare and have, whether they were right or wrong is not the issue here, because people actually like us are not consulted in most cases. We become victims of warfare. It's nothing to do with we have no capacity to stop that. Even those of us who are so lucky to be in democracies like you are, we don't really have so much influence sometimes when things become critical and decisions are made in our name.